Hi.
Don't get involved, call the professionals, your decisions kill people. I whisper to myself like a mantra as I stare down at the unconscious man sprawled across the narrow forest path that leads to my cabin, his dark blood seeping into the fallen leaves while storm clouds gather overhead with the kind of ominous speed that means I have maybe 20 minutes before the mountain becomes impassable, maybe less before hypothermia claims another victim of my poor judgment. The rational part of my brain, the part that's kept me alive and isolated for 3 years since I lost my partner because of my choices, screams at me to call 911 and wait for people who actually know what they're doing, people whose medical decisions don't end with their teammates falling into darkness while storm winds howl like the voices of the dead. But even as I reach for my phone with trembling fingers, I can see the gashes along his ribs where something with claws tried to tear him apart, can see the way his breathing is growing shallower with each passing moment. And I know with the same bone-deep certainty that used to make me an exceptional rescue officer that he won't survive the 40-minute response time, won't live to see the professional help that my guilty conscience insists is the only safe choice. "This is exactly why you moved up here," I mutter, kneeling beside him despite every instinct screaming at me to step away, to let someone else make the life or death decisions that I've proven myself catastrophically bad at making, to avoid situations where people's lives depend on your judgment, but my hands are already moving with muscle memory I can't suppress, checking his pulse, assessing the damage, falling back into patterns of care that feel as natural as breathing even though they terrify me more than any storm. His face is turned away from me, dark hair matted with rain and something I don't want to identify, but when I gently move his head to check for spinal injury my fingers brush against skin that's warm despite the dropping temperature, and the contact sends an unexpected jolt of electricity through me that has nothing to do with static and everything to do with a connection I've never felt before, not even during my closest professional partnerships. "Come on," I breathe, making the choice that goes against every protective pattern I've built around my failure. "You're not dying on my mountain, not tonight," and somehow I manage to get my arms under his shoulders, to drag his limp form the final 100 yards to my cabin while lightning begins to flicker through the trees like nature's own emergency beacons, illuminating a rescue that should be handled by people who haven't already proven that their medical decisions get their partners killed. The firelight dances across his unconscious features as I work to clean and suture his wounds with supplies I keep stocked despite swearing I'd never use these skills again, and when my bare fingers accidentally brush against his skin while positioning the needle, that same electric warmth flares between us, stronger this time, accompanied by the strangest sensation that my hands are steadier than they've been in years, that my clinical instincts are sharper, more focused, as if his presence somehow amplifies the competence I thought my partner's death had destroyed forever. "What are you?" I whisper to the stranger whose life I'm trying to save against my better judgment, whose unconscious form seems to be calling to parts of me I thought were dead and buried with my professional identity. And as I continue stitching by firelight while the storm rages outside, I can't shake the feeling that bringing him inside was either the best decision I've made since retreating to this mountain or the worst mistake of my carefully constructed isolation. Chapter 1. "You need to call someone qualified," I whisper to the unconscious man sprawled across my kitchen table, his blood seeping into the worn wood despite the towels I've pressed beneath him. But even as the words leave my lips I know there's no time for the 40-minute drive down the mountain to the nearest hospital, not with the storm howling outside my windows like a living thing and his pulse growing weaker under my fingertips. His dark hair is matted with rain and something else I don't want to identify, his clothes torn in patterns that look less like an accident and more like claws, and when I push back his jacket to assess the damage, the scent that rises from his skin makes my breath catch. Pine and winter air, but underneath something wild and dangerous that sets every instinct I've spent 3 years suppressing on high alert. "This is exactly why you moved up here," I mutter, reaching for the first aid kit I keep stocked despite telling myself I'd never use these skills again, to avoid situations where people's lives depend on your decisions. But my hands are already moving with muscle memory I can't suppress, checking his airway, assessing the gash along his ribs that's too clean to be from a fall and too deep to ignore. The firelight flickers across his face as I work, casting shadows that make his features look carved from stone. And when my fingers brush against his wrist to check his pulse again, that strange warmth I felt in the forest returns, spreading up my arm like electricity, making the clinical detachment I'm desperately trying to maintain impossible to sustain. Dr. Chen, I say into my phone, grateful when she answers on the second ring despite the late hour. I have someone here who needs medical attention, but I can't get him down the mountain tonight. And I can hear the concern in her voice when she asks about his condition, the same voice that talked me through those first terrible weeks after Emma's funeral when sleep was impossible and guilt felt like a physical weight on my chest. His breathing is shallow but steady, and as I describe his injuries to Sarah, following her calm instructions to clean and bandage the worst of the wounds, I catch myself studying the strong line of his jaw, the way his lashes cast shadows on his cheekbones, wondering what color his eyes are and immediately hating myself for the thought because this is exactly how everything went wrong before, caring too much, getting too involved, making decisions based on emotion instead of protocol. Keep him warm and monitor his breathing, Sarah says, and call me immediately if anything changes. But as I hang up the phone and look down at this stranger who's somehow invaded the sanctuary I've built from my failures, I realize I'm already past the point of professional distance, already invested in his survival in a way that terrifies me more than any storm. I drag blankets from my bedroom, the same quilts Emma helped me pick out during our last shopping trip before everything changed, and as I layer them carefully over his motionless form, my hand accidentally brushes against his forehead, skin-to-skin contact that sends that inexplicable warmth racing through me again, stronger this time, accompanied by the strangest sensation that his pain is somehow lessening under my touch. What the hell, I breathe, pulling my hand back as if burned, but the damage is done. I felt something in that moment, something that goes against everything I know about medicine and healing. Something that makes the rational part of my mind scream that I should call the authorities and hand this over to someone else. The wind rattles the windows with renewed fury, as if the storm itself is responding to whatever just passed between us, and I find myself sinking into the chair beside him, studying his face in the firelight, noting the aristocratic nose that looks like it's been broken at least once, the full lips that even unconscious seem to hold secrets, the broad shoulders that strain against his torn shirt in a way that makes me wonder what he does for a living, what brought him to my isolated corner of the mountain, and why every instinct I have is telling me that bringing him inside was either the best decision I've made in years or the worst mistake of my carefully constructed solitary life. The clock on the mantel chimes midnight, marking the beginning of what I suspect will be the longest night I've endured since I fled civilization, and as I settle in to monitor his condition, I catch myself whispering a prayer to whatever force might be listening that this stranger survives until morning, because the alternative, having another death on my conscience, is something I know would finally break what's left of my sanity. Chapter 2. You are a rescuer, he says, his voice rough with sleep and something deeper, and I nearly drop the coffee mug I'm holding as I turn from the kitchen counter to find him awake. Those eyes I'd wondered about now revealed to be the most unsettling shade of blue I've ever seen, like winter sky just before a blizzard. I correct sharply, slamming the closet door where my old gear hangs like accusations, the sound echoing through the small space as I try to ignore how his gaze follows my every movement, how even injured and barely conscious 12 hours ago he somehow managed to notice the rescue equipment I keep hidden behind winter coats and old hiking boots. Not everyone can be saved, I add, the words bitter on my tongue as I pour coffee into 2 mugs, my hands steadier than they have any right to be considering the way he's looking at me, like he can see straight through the walls I've built around myself, especially those closest to you. The admission slips out before I can stop it, and I watch his expression shift from curiosity to something that might be understanding, a recognition that makes my chest tighten because I don't want his sympathy, don't want him to look at me like I'm broken, even though that's exactly what I am. I had a partner, I continue, unable to stop the words now that they've started, settling into the chair across from him as he carefully pushes himself upright against the pillows I'd arranged, wincing slightly but refusing my offer of help with a shake of his head that tells me he's as uncomfortable with dependence as I am with responsibility. Emma. We worked together for 3 years, and she was the best mountain rescue officer I ever knew, fearless in a way that made everyone around her feel invincible, like nothing could go wrong as long as she was on the team. His blue eyes never leave my face as I speak, and there's something in his stillness that makes me want to keep talking, to share things I haven't said out loud since the mandatory counseling sessions I walked out of after 2 weeks because talking about it only made the guilt heavier, more real. I was senior officer, I whisper, the title feeling foreign after years of deliberately forgetting it, which meant I made the decisions, I chose when to go and when to wait. I decided who lived and who died based on weather conditions and risk assessments and all the training they drill into you until it becomes instinct. He reaches across the small space between us then, his fingers brushing mine where they rest on the table, and that same electric warmth shoots through me, stronger now that he's conscious, making my pulse race in a way that has nothing to do with anxiety and everything to do with the way he's touching me like he has every right, like he somehow knows that physical contact is the last thing I should want and the only thing that might actually help. What happened to her? He asks softly, and the gentleness in his voice nearly undoes me completely because no one has asked me that question with genuine care since the investigation. Since the reports and the blame and the endless replaying of every decision I made that night. One operation changed everything, I manage, my voice barely above a whisper as his thumb traces across my knuckles in a gesture so tender it makes my eyes burn with unshed tears, and after that I left the service, left everything, came up here where the only person who can get hurt by my choices is me. The silence that follows feels heavy with unspoken understanding, and I find myself studying his face in the morning light streaming through my small windows, noting how the harsh angles of his cheekbones soften when he's concentrating on something other than his own pain, how his mouth curves slightly at one corner as if he's more accustomed to smiling than the grimness he's shown so far. You know what it's like, I say suddenly, the realization hitting me with unexpected force, to lose people you're supposed to protect, and the way his jaw tightens tells me I'm right, that whatever brought him to my mountain bleeding and broken has its roots in the same kind of failure that haunts my dreams. He doesn't deny it, just squeezes my hand gently before pulling away, and I immediately miss the warmth of his touch, the way it seemed to quiet the constant noise in my head. The endless loop of what-ifs and should-haves that have been my only companions for 3 years. I should check your bandages, I say, desperate to fill the silence with something practical, something that doesn't require me to examine why this stranger's presence feels more like coming home than anything I've experienced since Emma died. And when he nods his agreement, I notice how carefully he moves, like someone who's learned to anticipate pain before it arrives. His shirt is ruined beyond salvaging, and when he starts to lift it over his head I step forward instinctively to help, my fingers brushing against the warm skin of his back as I ease the fabric away from his shoulder, and the contact sends that strange current through me again, accompanied this time by the unsettling sensation that the wound beneath the bandage is already healing faster than it should, faster than any injury I've ever treated. How are you feeling? I ask, unwrapping the gauze with more care than necessary, partly because I want to avoid causing him pain and partly because touching him seems to affect us both in ways I don't understand, ways that make my professional training feel inadequate for whatever is happening between us. Better, he says, and there's surprise in his voice, as if he hadn't expected to be able to say that with any honesty. Much better than I should, and when he turns to meet my eyes I see something there that mirrors my own confusion. A recognition that whatever passed between us last night when I touched his forehead was more than imagination, more than the desperate wishful thinking of someone who's forgotten how to help anyone. Chapter 3. Tell me about the pack you lost, I say as we sit on the front porch watching sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, the words slipping out before I can stop them because something about the way he's been staring at the tree line for the past hour tells me he's seeing ghosts in the shadows. And after sharing my own failures yesterday, I find myself wanting to understand the weight he carries in those impossibly blue eyes. He goes still beside me, coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips, and I can feel the tension radiating from him like heat from a fire. The same kind of careful control I recognize in myself when someone gets too close to the truth I've spent years running from. You don't have to tell me, I add quickly, but even as I say it I realize I want him to, want to know what put that haunted look in his eyes, what made him the kind of person who refuses help even when he's bleeding, what brought him to my mountain alone and injured in the middle of a storm. 7 of us, he says finally, his voice so quiet I have to lean closer to hear him, close enough that his scent fills my senses again, that wild pine and winter air combination that makes something deep in my chest tighten with an awareness I'm not ready to examine. My responsibility to keep them safe, and I failed every single one of them. The admission hangs between us like a physical thing, heavy with the kind of guilt I know intimately. And without thinking I reach across the space between our chairs to cover his hand with mine, that electric warmth sparking immediately at the contact, stronger now, almost overwhelming in its intensity. How? I whisper, and the single word seems to unlock something in him because suddenly he's talking, telling me about a family unit that was more than blood, about leading them into territory that should have been safe. About an attack that came without warning in the dead of night when they were all sleeping under his protection. I was supposed to sense danger, he continues, his fingers turning beneath mine to intertwine with them, the contact sending waves of that strange energy up my arm, supposed to know when something was wrong, but I failed them, and by morning I was the only one left alive. The pain in his voice is so raw it makes my throat tight with empathy. And I find myself squeezing his hand without conscious thought, wanting to offer the kind of comfort I've never been able to give myself, the kind of absolution that seems impossible when you're drowning in your own mistakes. It wasn't your fault, I say, the same words people tried to use on me after Emma died, words that felt meaningless then but somehow carry more weight when I'm saying them to him, when I can see how desperately he needs to hear them even if he can't believe them yet. You couldn't have known, I continue, surprised by the conviction in my own voice, just like I couldn't have known that Marcus was lying when he called for help that night, couldn't have predicted that the equipment would fail at exactly the wrong moment, couldn't have seen the future well enough to make different choices. He turns to look at me then, really look at me, and there's something in his expression that makes my breath catch, a kind of recognition that goes deeper than shared trauma. Deeper than the strange connection we've felt since I first touched him. You understand, he says, and it's not a question but a statement of wonder, as if he hadn't expected to find someone who truly comprehended the specific hell of being responsible for others' safety and failing them when it mattered most. I understand carrying ghosts, I admit, watching how the dying light catches in his dark hair, how it softens the sharp edges of his face and makes him look younger, less burdened. I understand waking up every morning wondering if you could have done something different, something better, something that would have kept them alive. The mountain wind picks up around us, carrying the scent of pine and approaching night, and I realize we've been sitting here holding hands for longer than any casual touch should last. but neither of us seems willing to break the connection that feels like the first honest thing I've experienced in years. My team called me Adam, he says suddenly, and I realize this is the first time he's told me his name, the first real piece of himself he's offered beyond the careful revelations about loss and responsibility. Jennifer, I reply, though something tells me he already knows, the same way I somehow knew he was important before I even saw his face clearly, the same way my body recognized his presence before my mind caught up with what was happening. Jennifer, he repeats, and the way he says my name makes it sound like something precious, something worth saving, and for the first time since Emma died I allow myself to wonder if maybe isolation isn't the only way to keep from hurting the people I care about. The stars are beginning to appear overhead, tiny pinpricks of light in the darkening sky, and as we sit here in comfortable silence I realize that for the first time in 3 years I'm not fighting the urge to flee when someone gets too close, not building walls or planning escape routes, just existing in this moment with someone who understands the weight of failure and somehow makes it feel less crushing simply by sharing the burden. We should go inside, I say eventually, though every part of me resists the suggestion because ending this moment feels like breaking something fragile and important, something I'm not sure we'll be able to recreate once we return to the practical concerns of his recovery and my carefully maintained solitude. Chapter 4. Show me, Adam says as we stand at the edge of the forest clearing behind my cabin, morning sunlight filtering through the canopy above us in dappled patterns that remind me of the way light used to dance across Emma's face when she was concentrating on a difficult rescue, and despite every instinct screaming at me to refuse, to keep my skills buried where they can't hurt anyone else, I find myself nodding because something about the way he's looking at me makes me want to prove that I'm not completely broken, that there's still something useful left in these hands that have held too much death. Basic trail safety, I say, pulling rope from the pack I haven't touched in 3 years, my fingers remembering the familiar weight of carabiners and anchor points despite my mind's resistance, since you're apparently the type to wander into dangerous territory without proper preparation, and the gentle teasing in my voice surprises me because I haven't felt light enough for humor since the night Emma fell into darkness. He watches intently as I demonstrate knot techniques, his blue eyes tracking every movement of my hands with a focus that makes my skin warm under his gaze, and when I guide his fingers through the motions of tying a figure-8 follow-through, that electric current passes between us again, stronger now, making my pulse race and my breathing shallow in a way that has nothing to do with the physical exertion of climbing instruction. Like this? He asks, his voice rougher than usual as my hands cover his to correct his grip, and I nod without trusting myself to speak because the heat radiating from his skin seems to be affecting my ability to think clearly, to maintain the professional distance that kept me sane during years of training partners and rescue scenarios. You're a natural, I manage, stepping back to create space between us before I do something foolish like lean into the warmth of his broad chest, before I forget that getting attached to people I'm responsible for teaching is exactly the kind of mistake that ends in tragedy. Must be the company, he replies, and there's something in his tone that makes me look up to find him watching me with an expression that's far from casual, an intensity that makes my knees weak and my heart hammer against my ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. We work together for the next hour, moving through terrain that would challenge most hikers, and I find myself marveling at how naturally we move as a team, how he seems to anticipate my instructions before I give them, how his presence beside me makes me feel competent again instead of dangerous, useful instead of destructive. You trust me, I say suddenly, the realization hitting me with unexpected force as we navigate a particularly tricky section where one wrong step could mean a 20-foot fall onto unforgiving granite. You're trusting me to keep you safe. And the wonder in my voice makes him pause mid-step to turn and look at me with those devastating blue eyes. Completely, he says simply, as if it's the most natural thing in the world to put his life in the hands of someone who failed the last person who depended on her, as if my history of catastrophic judgment calls doesn't matter as much as whatever he sees when he looks at me now, in this moment, in this clearing where sunlight makes everything feel possible again. I don't understand why, I whisper, my voice breaking slightly, because no one has trusted me with anything important since Emma died, because Chief Morrison still calls occasionally asking if I'm ready to return to active duty, but his voice always carries doubt, always suggests he's asking out of obligation rather than genuine belief in my abilities. Because you're brilliant at this, Adam says, moving closer, close enough that I can see the gold flecks in his blue eyes, close enough that his scent surrounds me like an embrace, because watching you work is like watching someone speak a language they were born to know, and because when you touch me I feel whole for the first time since I lost everything that mattered. The confession hangs between us like a bridge I'm terrified to cross, and when he reaches up to brush a strand of hair from my face, his fingers lingering against my cheek, I feel myself leaning into the contact despite every rational thought telling me to step away, to maintain boundaries, to remember that caring about people is what gets them killed. There's something else, he continues, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw with a gentleness that makes my breath catch, something I need to tell you about what I am, about why I was alone on your mountain that night. And the serious tone in his voice sends a chill through me that has nothing to do with the mountain air filtering through the trees above us. You're scaring me, I admit, but I don't pull away from his touch because whatever he's about to reveal feels less important than the way his presence has started to fill all the empty spaces in my carefully constructed solitude, the way his faith in my abilities is slowly rebuilding something I thought Emma's death had destroyed forever. Don't be scared, he whispers, and there's something almost desperate in his voice, as if my fear might drive him away before he can explain whatever truth he's been carrying. Just know that everything I feel for you is real, everything between us is real, even if the rest doesn't make sense. The wind picks up around us, rustling the leaves overhead and carrying with it a scent I can't quite identify. Something wild and untamed that seems to emanate from Adam himself, and as I look into his eyes I see something shift there, something that isn't quite human flickering in the depths of that impossible blue. Show me, I say, echoing his earlier words, though part of me knows that whatever he's about to reveal will change everything between us, will either destroy the fragile trust we've built or transform it into something deeper. Something that will make my 3 years of careful isolation seem like the preparation for this moment rather than an ending. Not here, he says, glancing around the clearing as if assessing potential dangers I can't see. Tonight, when we're safe inside, when I can explain properly without risking either of us. And the protective edge in his voice makes something flutter in my chest because no one has worried about my safety since Emma. No one has made me feel worth protecting instead of just tolerated.
Chapter 5. She deserves to know the truth before she gets any deeper into whatever this is between us, before a healing touch becomes something she can't take back. And as I watch Jennifer move through her cabin preparing dinner with the same careful precision she brings to everything else, I know that tonight will either bind us together or drive her away forever. The scent of her surrounds me even from across the room, something uniquely human and warm that calls to parts of me I thought died with my pack. And when she glances over her shoulder to smile at me, the wolf inside stirs restlessly, recognizing something in her that transcends species, something that makes the curse feel less like a death sentence and more like a test I might actually survive. You're staring, she says, turning from a stove with that slight blush that's been driving me insane for days, the one that makes me want to cross the room and show her exactly what effect she has on me. Consequences be damned, but I force myself to stay seated because the moment I touch her skin to skin, everything will change, and she needs to understand what she's accepting before that happens. Can you blame me? I reply, watching her face carefully for any sign that the intensity in my voice frightens her. But instead of retreating, she sets down the wooden spoon and moves toward me with that quiet confidence I've come to associate with her professional competence, the same steady courage that probably made her an exceptional rescue officer before tragedy convinced her she was dangerous. "Tell me," she says, settling into the chair across from me at her small kitchen table, close enough that I can see the flecks of green in her brown eyes, close enough that her scent makes my pulse race in ways that have nothing to do with human attraction and everything to do with the recognition that she is mine, has been mine since the moment she chose to save me instead of calling for help. "The pack I lost wasn't just my family," I begin, my voice rougher than I intended because admitting what I am feels like standing naked in front of someone who has every reason to run screaming into the night. "They were wolves, Jennifer, and so am I, which means the attack that killed them was targeted specifically at our kind, meant to eliminate us before we could find mates and continue our bloodline." The silence that follows stretches between us like a chasm I'm not sure we can cross, and I watch her face carefully for signs of disbelief, fear, revulsion, any of the reactions I've learned to expect when humans discover what I am. But instead, she just nods slowly as if some part of her already knew, as if the strange connection between us finally makes sense in a way it couldn't before. "That's why your injuries healed so quickly," she says, and there's wonder in her voice rather than terror, scientific curiosity rather than rejection. "That's why you smell like pine forests and winter storms. That's why touching you feels like electricity." And the acceptance in her tone makes something tight in my chest loosen for the first time since I woke up in her cabin. "There's more," I continue, forcing myself to meet her eyes even though what I'm about to tell her could destroy any chance we have at something real, something lasting. "I'm cursed, Jennifer, cursed so that anyone I care about, anyone I allow myself to love, slowly loses their life force through my touch until there's nothing left." And the words taste like ashes in my mouth because I can already see her processing the implications, understanding that getting closer to me means risking everything. "How?" she asks, leaning forward instead of pulling away. And the simple question contains multitudes because she's not asking if I'm telling the truth. She's asking for details, for solutions, for ways around the impossible situation fate has handed us. A witch whose advances I rejected, I admit, shame coloring my voice because my pride cost me everything that mattered, cost my pack their lives, and me any hope of normal connection. She bound my wolf form to feed on the essence of those I love most, which means everyone who gets close to me eventually withers away unless I stay distant, cold, untouchable. The firelight flickers across her face as she considers this, and I can practically see her mind working through the problem with the same systematic approach she probably used to solve rescue scenarios, looking for angles and alternatives instead of simply accepting defeat. "But I've been touching you for days," she points out, reaching across the table to take my hand in hers, that familiar warmth sparking between us immediately. And I feel stronger, not weaker, more alive than I have since Emma died. And the truth in her words makes my heart race, because she's right. The curse seems to work in reverse with her, feeding her energy instead of draining it, healing instead of harming. "I noticed that too," I confess, intertwining our fingers and marveling at how perfectly her smaller hand fits in mine. How right this feels despite everything I know about the danger I represent to anyone who gets too close. Usually by now someone would be showing signs of fatigue, weakness, but you're glowing with health, getting stronger every day we're together. The implications hang between us like a promise I'm afraid to believe, and when she stands without releasing my hand, tugging me gently toward the couch where firelight dances across the walls in warm golden patterns, I follow because refusing her anything feels impossible now that she knows what I am and hasn't run. "Show me," she says, settling beside me close enough that our thighs touch, close enough that I can feel the heat radiating from her skin through the thin fabric of her sweater. Show me your wolf form. Let me see all of you. And the request sends a thrill of terror and anticipation through me, because no human has ever asked to witness my transformation. No one has ever wanted to see the beast that lives beneath my skin. Are you sure? I ask, my voice hoarse with the effort of holding back the change that wants to come just from her proximity, from the acceptance in her voice and the trust in her eyes. Because once you see me like that, once you know exactly what I am, there's no going back to pretending I'm just some injured hiker who wandered onto your mountain. I don't want to go back, she says firmly, her free hand coming up to cup my cheek in a gesture so tender it makes my chest ache with longing. I want to go forward, Adam. I want to understand every part of you, even the parts that scare you. And the conviction in her voice gives me the courage to let go of the tight control I've maintained since arriving here, to trust that she won't flee when she sees the predator that shares my soul. The transformation begins slowly, warmth spreading through my limbs as bones begin to shift and stretch, and through it all Jennifer keeps hold of my hand, her thumb stroking across my knuckles in a rhythm that anchors me to her humanity even as my own slips away, replaced by enhanced senses that make her scent overwhelming, intoxicating, perfect in ways that confirm what I've suspected since that first night. She's my mate, the one person in existence who can touch me without dying, who can love me without being consumed.
Chapter 6. The wolf that emerges from Adam's transformation is magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Silver-gray fur gleaming in the firelight as he settles on the floor beside my couch, blue eyes that are unmistakably his watching me with an intensity that should frighten me but instead fills me with a sense of rightness I haven't felt since before Emma died. "You're beautiful," I whisper, reaching out slowly to run my fingers through the thick fur at his neck, and the rumble of contentment that vibrates through his massive frame makes something deep in my chest flutter with warmth, with the realization that I'm the first person to see him like this and not recoil in terror. His wolf form is larger than any natural animal, easily the size of a small horse, with intelligent eyes that track my every movement as if memorizing the way I look in this moment, the way the firelight plays across my face as I marvel at the creature he becomes when humanity falls away. "This is why you understood," I say, my voice barely above a whisper as understanding dawns with crystal clarity. "Why you knew exactly how it felt to lose people you were supposed to protect, because you weren't just their leader, you were their alpha, responsible for their survival in ways that go deeper than human comprehension." The wolf, Adam, presses his massive head against my palm, and through that contact I feel an echo of his memories. Flashes of running through moonlit forests with 6 other wolves, of hunting together, sleeping in a pile of warm bodies, of the bone-deep contentment that comes from belonging to something larger than yourself. "My phone," I say suddenly, remembering the call that interrupted our quiet evening an hour ago, the call I'd ignored because Chief Morrison's voice always brings back memories I'm not ready to face, but now I realize I need to hear what he wanted. Need to know if there's an emergency somewhere that requires my skills. I should call him back, I continue, reaching for the device with my free hand while keeping the other buried in Adam's fur, unwilling to break the connection that feels more essential than breathing. Chief Morrison doesn't call unless someone's in real trouble, and ignoring it won't make the guilt go away if something happens and I could have helped. Adam's wolf form goes still beneath my touch, every muscle tensing as if he senses the conflict raging inside me, the eternal war between my desire to help people and my terror of being responsible for another death, another Emma falling into darkness while I watch helplessly from above. "Jennifer," Morrison's voice crackles through the speaker when I finally return his call. "Thank God, we've got a situation developing about 20 miles south of your location. Family of 4 trapped by a rockslide with weather moving in fast. and the state team can't get there until morning at the earliest. The familiar surge of adrenaline courses through me at his words, the same response that used to make me feel alive and useful and necessary, but now it's tangled with fear, with the memory of making the wrong choice at the wrong moment and losing everything that mattered. I'm not on active duty, I remind him, though my eyes are already moving to the closet where my gear waits like an accusation. I told you 3 years ago that I was done, that I couldn't trust myself to make those decisions anymore. This family doesn't have 3 years, Morrison replies, his voice carrying the weight of authority that used to make me snap to attention, and you're the closest qualified rescuer to their location, which means you're their best hope of seeing sunrise. Adam's wolf form shifts beside me, moving to press his warm flank against my legs in a gesture of support that somehow steadies the panic threatening to overwhelm my rational mind, and when I look down into those impossible blue eyes I see not judgment but faith, the same unwavering trust he showed me in the forest when he put his life in my hands without question. I can't do it alone, I say, the admission scraping my throat raw because acknowledging my limitations feels like admitting defeat, like proving that Emma's faith in my abilities was misplaced. Not anymore, not after what happened last time I tried to save someone. You won't be alone, Adam's voice says, and I turn to find him human again, naked and magnificent in the firelight, reaching for the clothes he'd discarded before transforming. I'll be with you, Jennifer, every step of the way, and my wolf senses will give us advantages no human rescue team could match. The offer hangs between us like a lifeline I'm terrified to grab because accepting means putting him in danger, means risking the one good thing that's happened to me since Emma's death, but refusing means letting 4 people die when I have the skills and knowledge to save them. This is exactly what I was afraid of, I whisper, torn between professional duty and personal terror. This is how it starts, with one emergency, one choice to get involved, and then someone I care about ends up dead because I made the wrong call. The wind outside picks up suddenly, rattling the windows with unusual force for a clear night, and Adam's head snaps toward the sound with the sharp alertness of a predator sensing something wrong, something that doesn't belong in the natural order of things. There's something else, he says, his voice tight with concern as he moves to peer through the curtains, something about this storm that feels wrong, unnatural, like it's being directed rather than following normal weather patterns. I join him at the window, and as I watch the clouds gathering with impossible speed above the mountain peaks, swirling in patterns that defy meteorological explanation, I feel a chill that has nothing to do with the dropping temperature and everything to do with the growing certainty that this night will test everything I thought I knew about the world, about myself, about what it means to save people when the danger comes from sources no rescue manual ever covered. Chapter 7. This isn't a normal storm, I shout over the howling wind as we climb the treacherous slope toward the rockslide site, my headlamp cutting through darkness that seems to swallow light itself, and every instinct I've developed over years of mountain rescue is screaming that we're walking into something far more dangerous than a simple weather emergency. Adam moves beside me with inhuman grace, his enhanced senses guiding us through terrain that would be impossible to navigate in these conditions without his wolf abilities. And despite the terror clawing at my chest, I find myself marveling at how naturally we work together, how his supernatural awareness complements my technical expertise in ways that make us more effective than any human rescue team could be. The scent is wrong, he calls back, his voice barely audible above the wind. There's something ancient in this storm, something that wants to keep us from reaching them. And the grim certainty in his tone makes my blood run cold because if Adam's wolf instincts are telling him we're dealing with supernatural forces, then the family trapped ahead isn't just fighting time and weather, they're fighting something that actively wants them dead. The rockslide side appears through the swirling snow like something from a nightmare, massive boulders scattered across what used to be a hiking trail, And somewhere beneath that chaos of stone and debris 4 people are running out of air while the storm above us builds to impossible intensity. There, I point toward a gap between 2 house-sized rocks where my trained eye spots the telltale signs of a survival shelter. They're smart, they found protection and made themselves visible, and the professional assessment steadies my nerves because this is what I'm good at, what I was born to do, even if the circumstances are unlike anything I've encountered before. Adam's form begins to shift beside me, bones elongating and muscles reshaping as he prepares to transform, and I grab his arm before the change can complete, feeling that familiar electric current pass between us even through our heavy gloves. Not yet, I say, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. I need your human hands for the technical work, need you to help me set the anchor points for the rope system, and he nods his understanding, fighting back the wolf that wants to emerge in response to the supernatural threat he senses gathering around us. The next hour passes in a blur of practiced movements, rappelling equipment clicking into place with the same muscle memory that saved my sanity during the dark months after Emma's death. And as we work together to create a secure extraction route, I feel something I haven't experienced in 3 years, the pure joy of using my skills to help people, the satisfaction of knowing that my expertise might actually save lives instead of costing them. Jennifer, a voice calls from below, thin and desperate, please, my daughter. She's stopped responding, and the panic in those words sends adrenaline surging through my system because every second we waste increases the chances that we'll be too late, that I'll have to live with another death on my conscience. I'm going down, I tell Adam, clipping into the rope system with movements that are automatic after thousands of training hours. Stay here and monitor the anchors, and if anything goes wrong, if the storm gets worse or you sense more supernatural interference, you get out and call for backup. I'm not leaving you, he says fiercely, his blue eyes blazing with protective fury. Whatever's causing this storm, whatever wants these people dead, it will have to go through me first. And the absolute conviction in his voice makes my heart race with emotions I don't have time to examine because there are lives hanging in the balance and every moment of delay brings us closer to tragedy. The descent into the debris field is nightmarish, loose rocks shifting under my weight as the supernatural storm pounds the mountain with increasing violence, and when I finally reach the small cavern where the family has taken shelter, I find a scene that breaks my heart. Parents holding their children close, the youngest girl unconscious from what looks like hypothermia, all of them looking at me with the kind of desperate hope that I remember seeing in Emma's eyes right before everything went wrong. We're going to get you out, I promise, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. My partner and I have a rope system set up. We're going to lift you to safety one at a time, starting with your daughter. And as I begin the delicate process of preparing the unconscious child for extraction, I feel Adam's presence above like an anchor, his supernatural strength maintaining the rope system against winds that should have torn it apart by now. But as I work to secure the rescue harness around the little girl's body, the storm overhead suddenly intensifies beyond anything natural, and through the chaos I hear Adam's voice raised in what sounds like a roar of challenge, a sound no human throat could produce, and I know with bone-deep certainty that whatever supernatural force has been hunting this family has finally decided to make its move. The temperature plummets so rapidly that my breath turns to ice crystals the moment it leaves my lungs, and the parents press closer together in terror as shadows begin moving independently of their sources, writhing across the cavern walls like living things hungry for warmth and life. Hold on to each other, I tell the family, my training kicking in despite the impossibility of the situation. Whatever happens, don't let go, don't let the cold separate you. And even as I speak, I'm running calculations in my head, trying to figure out how to extract 4 people in conditions that are deteriorating faster than any natural disaster I've ever encountered. Above us, Adam's roar transforms into something that makes the very rocks around us vibrate, a sound of pure fury and power that seems to pause the advancing shadows for a moment. giving me the precious seconds I need to clip the unconscious girl into the evacuation harness and signal for her to be pulled up. "Mama," the girl whispers as she begins to rise, her eyes fluttering open just enough to focus on her mother's face, and the relief in that single word gives me the strength to continue working despite the supernatural forces trying to claim this family as their own. The rope system groans under the assault of winds that seem to have conscious intent, trying to tear apart everything Adam and I have built, but somehow our anchor points hold. Somehow our careful engineering proves stronger than whatever dark magic is powering this storm. "You next," I tell the mother, helping her into the harness with hands that are steady despite the fact that shadows are now reaching for us with tendrils that feel cold enough to freeze flesh on contact. "Your family needs you topside, needs you to help coordinate the final extractions." As she rises towards safety, carried by Adam's inhuman strength and our professional expertise, I feel a familiar surge of pride, the same satisfaction I used to find in successful rescues before guilt convinced me that my skills were a curse rather than a gift, and for the first time since Emma's death I allow myself to believe that maybe I really can save people. Maybe my judgment isn't as flawed as I've spent 3 years believing.
Chapter 8. The ancient curse that binds my wolf recognizes the malevolent force driving this storm, something older and hungrier than the witch who first marked me with her twisted magic. And as I feel Jennifer working below me with the steady competence that makes my chest swell with pride and terror in equal measure, I know that tonight will either break the chains that have kept me isolated for years or destroy everything I've finally found worth protecting. The shadows reaching for her aren't mere darkness, but manifestations of something that feeds on despair, on the kind of guilt and self-doubt that has kept Jennifer hiding on this mountain, and I can sense its hunger growing stronger as it recognizes in her the same emotional wounds that make supernatural prey vulnerable to possession and consumption. Not her. I snarl into the wind, feeling my human form strain against the wolf that wants to emerge fully, to meet this threat with claws and fangs instead of the careful control that has defined my existence since losing my pack. "You cannot have her. She is mine to protect." And the declaration echoes across the mountain with power that surprises me, because it's been so long since I've claimed anything or anyone worth fighting for. The rope system shudders under an assault that has nothing to do with wind and everything to do with malevolent intelligence, trying to snap the lifelines that connect Jennifer to safety, to me, and I pour every ounce of supernatural strength into maintaining the anchor points, because losing her now would destroy what's left of my sanity, would prove that I'm truly cursed to watch everyone I care about die. Through our connection, I can feel her working below, her movements precise and confident despite the chaos surrounding her, and the realization that she's not just surviving this nightmare, but thriving in it, using her skills to save lives instead of being paralyzed by fear, fills me with an emotion I haven't dared to name since the night my pack was slaughtered. "Almost there." Her voice crackles through the radio, steady and professional even as supernatural forces try to tear apart everything we've built together. Father and son coming up together. They're both conscious and stable, and the calm authority in her tone makes my heart race, because this is who she really is beneath the guilt and isolation. This is the woman Emma trained and believed in, the rescuer who chooses to save people even when the cost might be her own life. The shadows recoil as the final 2 survivors rise towards safety, their living warmth apparently too much for whatever darkness has been hunting them, and I feel a surge of triumph that has nothing to do with my own survival and everything to do with watching Jennifer reclaim her professional identity, seeing her remember that her skills are a gift rather than a curse. But the moment the family is clear of the debris field, the supernatural storm turns its full attention on us, and I can feel the ancient hunger focusing on Jennifer with an intensity that makes my wolf howl in protective fury, because whatever this thing is, it wants her specifically. wants the healer who dared to save lives in defiance of its plans. Jennifer, get up here now. A command through the radio. Not carrying that desperation makes my voice rough. Whatever's down there with you, it's not interested in the family anymore. It wants you. And the sudden silence that follows my warning makes my blood turn to ice, because I know she's realized the same thing, that she's been the real target all along. The rope goes slack in my hands as something cuts her lifeline from below, and without conscious thought, I'm transforming. Bones stretching and muscles reshaping as the wolf takes control, because my human form isn't strong enough to reach her in time, isn't fast enough to save the woman who's somehow become more important than my own survival. I plunge into the debris field in full wolf form, supernatural senses guiding me through the chaos toward Jennifer's location, and what I find there stops my heart. She's trapped beneath a boulder that wasn't there minutes ago, pinned but conscious, her eyes wide with pain and fear as shadows circle her like vultures waiting for death. I love you, I tell her, forcing the words out even though speaking in wolf form feels like swallowing broken glass. I'd rather die from the curse than live without you. And the confession seems to surprise the darkness as much as it surprises me, because the shadows hesitate, their hunger temporarily confused by the raw honesty of emotion that transcends species, transcends the supernatural boundaries that have defined my existence. I love you too, she whispers back, her voice barely audible over the storm, but clear enough to send power surging through me like lightning. That's why I won't let you face this alone. And somehow, impossibly, she's reaching for me despite the crushing weight of stone, her fingers finding mine just as the curse that has isolated me for years begins to unravel under the force of mutual love freely given. The moment our skin touches, energy explodes between us with such intensity that the shadows shriek and recoil, their dark forms dissolving like smoke in sunlight, as whatever supernatural force was feeding on our isolation suddenly finds itself starved of the despair it needs to survive. The boulder pinning Jennifer shifts without any effort from me, rolling away as if it weighs nothing, and I realize that the curse isn't just breaking, it's reversing, transforming from something that drains life into something that creates it, something that heals instead of harms. The storm, Jennifer breathes, looking up at skies that are already beginning to clear as natural weather patterns reassert themselves. It's over. Whatever was controlling it is gone. And the wonder in her voice matches my own amazement, because for the first time, since the witch marked me, I can touch someone I love without fear, without the constant terror of watching them waste away under my cursed influence. Not just the storm, I say, helping her to her feet with hands that shake from adrenaline and relief. The curse is broken, Jennifer, your love, your acceptance of what I am. It changed everything. And as I pull her against me, holding her close without any barrier between us, I feel the last of my supernatural isolation crumble away, replaced by a connection deeper than anything I experienced, even with my birth pack.
Chapter 9. I feel like I could move mountains, I whisper against Adam's lips as we finally break apart from our first real kiss, the one that sealed something fundamental between us on that storm-ravaged peak. And now as we make our way down through the protected valley toward town, I realize that the energy flowing between us isn't just emotional but something deeper, something that's healing wounds I didn't even know I still carried from Emma's death. The rescued family travels ahead of us, safe and warm in the emergency vehicle that finally reached us once the supernatural storm dissipated, and watching them reunite with relatives who'd been frantically searching gives me the same satisfaction I used to find in successful rescues, but magnified somehow, as if Adam's presence amplifies every positive emotion until even professional pride feels like something approaching joy. Your wolf form, I say, slipping my hand into his as we navigate the winding trail that leads back to civilization. When you transformed to save me, I felt something I've never experienced before, like my own healing abilities were somehow enhanced by proximity to your supernatural nature, and the admission makes him stop walking to turn and study my face with those impossible blue eyes that see too much, understand too deeply. The curse reversal, he replies, his thumb tracing circles on my palm that send warmth radiating up my arm. It didn't just break the life-draining magic, it transformed it into something that amplifies natural healing abilities, which means together we're capable of things neither of us could accomplish alone. And the implications of his words make my pulse race because I'm beginning to understand that what happened between us on that mountain was more than falling in love, it was the formation of something unprecedented, something that could change how we serve others. The supernatural community, I say suddenly, remembering fragments of conversation from Clara, the herbalist who's been quietly helping people in town deal with problems that conventional medicine can't touch. She mentioned once that there are people who need the kind of help that bridges human expertise and supernatural understanding, people who fall through the cracks because they don't fit into either world completely. Adam's expression grows thoughtful as we continue down the mountain, and I can practically see him processing the possibilities, the ways his supernatural knowledge and my rescue training could combine to help people that traditional emergency services can't reach. A new kind of rescue service, he says, his voice carrying the same careful hope I feel building in my chest, one that understands that some emergencies require more than human solutions, that some people need rescuers who can work with supernatural forces instead of being defeated by them. The idea takes shape between us as we walk, each contributing pieces until a vision emerges of something Emma would have approved of, something that honors her memory while building a future neither of us could have imagined alone. She would have loved this, I say, thinking of my partner's fearless approach to helping anyone in need. Emma always said that the best rescuers are the ones who adapt to whatever situation they find, who don't let conventional thinking limit their ability to save lives, and for the first time since her death I can speak her name without feeling like it might destroy me. Tell me about her, Adam says softly, and something in his tone makes me realize he's not asking out of curiosity but out of genuine desire to understand the person who shaped me into the rescuer he fell in love with, the partner whose example still guides my professional choices even 3 years after losing her. Emma believed that courage wasn't the absence of fear but the decision to act in spite of it. I begin, and as I share stories of her wisdom, her humor, her absolute conviction that every life was worth risking everything to save, I feel her presence not as a haunting guilt but as a blessing, a foundation that makes the future Adam and I are building together feel solid and right. The lights of town appear below us as we round the final curve, warm and welcoming after the supernatural darkness we've left behind. And as I look at the place where I've been hiding for 3 years, I realize it no longer feels like a refuge from the world but like a base of operations, a home where 2 damaged people found healing in each other and purpose in combining their gifts to serve others. Dr. Chen, I say, thinking of the woman who helped me through the worst of my grief, she'll want to examine us both after what we've been through. Make sure the supernatural healing didn't have any unexpected side effects, and the prospect of returning to the human world with Adam beside me, of integrating our new understanding with the practical concerns of building a life together, fills me with anticipation instead of the anxiety that used to accompany any thought of leaving my mountain sanctuary. Clara will want to document everything too, Adam adds, his arm tightening around my waist as we approach the first streetlights. She's been studying supernatural healing for decades, and what happened between us tonight could help her understand how to break other curses, how to heal other people who've been isolated by dark magic. And I realize that our love story isn't just about us finding each other. It's about discovering a new way to serve others that neither human medicine nor supernatural wisdom could achieve independently. Chief Morrison called while we were descending, I admit, pulling out my phone to check the messages I'd ignored during our walk. 3 more calls actually, and 2 texts asking if I'm ready to discuss returning to active duty. And instead of the familiar spike of anxiety that usually accompanies any contact from my former boss, I feel only calm certainty about what my answer will be. Not the same kind of active duty, Adam says, understanding immediately, something new, something that acknowledges what we've learned about the gaps in emergency services, about the people who need rescuers trained to handle supernatural threats. And the way he automatically includes himself in any future I'm planning makes my heart swell with a happiness I thought Emma's death had made impossible. Together, I say, stopping at the edge of town to turn and face him fully, to memorize this moment when everything changed from surviving in isolation to building something meaningful with someone who understands both my strengths and my scars. Whatever we build, whatever service we create, we do it together, as partners in every sense of the word. Partners, he agrees, sealing the promise with a kiss that tastes like mountain air and new beginnings, like the kind of future Emma would have wanted for me, the kind of love story that honors the past while embracing possibilities neither of us could have imagined when we were drowning in guilt and supernatural curses just days ago. Chapter 10. The memorial garden was Emma's idea originally, I tell Adam as we stand in the clearing behind what will soon be our new headquarters, a converted ranger station that perfectly bridges the human and supernatural worlds we're committed to serving. And I can hear the peace in my own voice as I speak her name, the way grief has transformed from a crushing weight into something that guides rather than destroys. She always said that the people we couldn't save deserved to be remembered alongside the ones we could, that honoring loss was just as important as celebrating success, and as I point to where we'll plant the memorial trees, each one representing a life that couldn't be rescued, I feel her presence as a blessing rather than a haunting, a foundation for the work Adam and I are building together. Dr. Chin approaches from the main building where she's been consulting with Clara about the medical protocols we'll need for supernatural emergencies, her practical clipboard and concerned expression reminding me why I trusted her during the darkest months after Emma's death, why her combination of professional competence and genuine caring made her the perfect person to help us establish this new kind of rescue service. The state licensing board approved our application, she announces, though the smile on her face is tinged with the same amazement I've been feeling for weeks as our impossible dream becomes bureaucratic reality. Apparently the documentation Clara provided about supernatural healing phenomena was compelling enough to create an entirely new category of emergency services. Adam's hand finds mine automatically as we listen to the details of insurance coverage and equipment requisitions, his touch still sending that electric warmth through me, but now it feels like coming home rather than discovering something miraculous. Like a connection so natural and essential that I can't imagine how I survived 3 years without it. Chief Morrison wants to meet next week, Dr. Chin continues, not to recruit you back to traditional mountain rescue, but to discuss how your new service might coordinate with conventional emergency response when situations require both human expertise and supernatural intervention. And the respect in her voice when she talks about our work makes my chest swell with pride because for the first time since Emma died I'm using my skills to build something instead of hiding from the possibility of failure. The first official call came in this morning, Clara adds, joining our small group with her arms full of herbs that will stock our unconventional medical supplies. A family in the next county dealing with what sounds like a haunting that's escalated beyond anything local authorities can handle, and they specifically requested the rescue team that helped during the supernatural storm last month. The prospect of our first real case as an official supernatural rescue service sends adrenaline coursing through me. The same anticipation I used to feel before difficult mountain rescues, but tempered now with the confidence that comes from having a partner whose abilities complement my own perfectly, whose presence makes me stronger instead of more vulnerable. We'll take it, I say, looking at Adam for confirmation and finding the same eager readiness in his blue eyes that I feel building in my own chest. But we go in together, we assess the situation together, we make decisions together. And the emphasis on partnership isn't just about professional protocol but about the promise we made to each other that night on the mountain when supernatural forces tried to tear us apart and only made our bond stronger. Together, he agrees, the single word carrying the weight of everything we've built since that storm-ravaged night when I chose to save a bleeding stranger instead of maintaining my careful isolation, when he chose to trust me with his deepest secrets instead of disappearing back into the wilderness where supernatural beings go to hide from a world that doesn't understand them. The afternoon sun filters through the trees around us, casting the same dappled light that used to remind me of Emma's face during our most challenging rescues, but now it illuminates the future we're creating rather than the past we're haunting, a place where grief has been transformed into wisdom, where professional trauma has become the foundation for serving others who need rescuers capable of bridging two worlds. The plaque arrived, Dr. Chin says softly, pulling a bronze memorial marker from her bag, for the garden, with Emma's name and the inscription you requested, and when I read the words we chose together, she taught us that courage in service makes loss meaningful. I feel the last piece of my healing click into place, the understanding that honoring her memory means continuing the work she loved, not abandoning it out of fear. She would be proud, Adam says, and there's no question in his voice, no attempt to comfort me with false platitudes. Just the simple truth that Emma would approve of what we've built, would love that her death led not to my professional destruction but to the creation of something entirely new, something that serves people no conventional rescue team could help. The sound of approaching vehicles draws our attention to the access road, and I recognize Chief Morrison's truck followed by what looks like a news van. The media attention we've been dreading but knew was inevitable once word spread about our unconventional rescue methods. Ready for this? Adam asks, squeezing my hand as we watch the small convoy approach, and I realize that facing public scrutiny doesn't terrify me the way it would have months ago because I'm no longer hiding from my professional identity, no longer ashamed of the skills that define who I am at my core. More than ready, I reply, thinking of all the people who might benefit from knowing that help exists for problems that fall outside conventional emergency services, all the supernatural beings who've been suffering in isolation because they didn't know there were rescuers trained to understand their unique needs. Ready? I ask, looking around at the headquarters we've built, the memorial garden we'll tend, the future we're about to step into as partners in every sense of the word, and when Adam nods and takes my hand I feel Emma's blessing in the mountain breeze that rustles the leaves above us, hear her voice in the distant sound of someone calling for help, knowing that this time I won't have to choose between love and service because I've finally found someone who understands that for people like us.
I'm so glad that you stay with me till the end. Like, subscribe, and let me know what would you change, what do you like about the story. See you in the next chapter, my beloved listeners.